I have promised Bradley that we will make sure that we are on agenda by the time we wrap up the panel here. So we're going to have hard stop time at 2 o'clock with this group. So I appreciate everybody taking their seats and joining us for this one. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Scott McMahon. It is on Julie, it doesn't work very well, kind of like me. So I will just try and talk louder. Is this better for folks? Okay, perfect.
I can hear you.
So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Scott McMahon. I'm a lobbyist with Flaherty & Hood. I work on lobbying issues for the coalition, but also run the Greater Minnesota Partnership. The Greater Minnesota Partnership is the coalition's sister organization that brings together businesses, local governments, chambers of commerce, foundations, higher education to work specifically on economic development issues. And surprise, surprise, childcare has been an issue that we've been a little bit involved with over the past few years. So this panel is very near and dear to my heart and the commitment that GMNP has going forward. This is going to be a different panel than we traditionally have at CGMC conferences, because what we're trying to do with this group is give you all a concrete example of what a community has done over the past few years to address the childcare shortage here in Candiota County on the grounds, with the hopes that when you all walk out of here, you have a better sense as to, hey, maybe something like this could work in our community, where we can bring together the local governments, the business community, and figure out that solution to the whole, or at least part of your childcare problems. I know all of you have some sort of childcare shortage in your community, and I know that because you keep calling me about these problems. So, our hope is that you have a better sense when we walk out of here where you might be able to go. I do want to turn your attention to your folders. Inside, I believe the left-hand side is a blue sheet that lists a wide variety of resources for you to have in your back pocket. The first resource I want to highlight for all of you is your local initiative foundation. As much as I appreciate hearing from all of you, calling them is a better first step than calling me. They've got access to all the resources. They have access to let you know where funding is, and they know how to connect you in with folks on the ground. In addition, I wanted to highlight a couple of the funding streams that you're going to hear about probably through this panel that are available either through deed or in partnership with the Initiative Foundation. So if there is one thing you keep from this conference, fold that paper up, put it in your pocket, take it back to your offices, give it to your city administrators. It's a piece of paper that you're not going to want to lose. So with that, I'm going to kick off our panel here and introduce our three panelists, starting from the far side. With somebody who probably doesn't need much of an introduction to this group, Scott Marquardt. Scott is the Executive Vice President of the Southwest Initiative Foundation, also serves on the board of the Greater Minnesota Partnership, and probably testifies on childcare issues more at the Capitol than I do. There's never a time in which I say, hey Scott, we have a hearing coming up, that he says, I'm in St. Paul already, where do I need to talk? He has been leading the childcare charge throughout Southwest Minnesota for a number of years now, and has great insight into kind of the myth view of what happened here in Candiota County. Next to Scott is Jenny Holweger. Jenny is relatively new to the Willmar community. She took over the Candiota Y in 2018, but working in childcare is nothing new to Jenny. She has over 2 decades of experience and came in here and really hit the ground running on working the issue here. So Jenny, we're excited to have you here. In addition, Jenny has also been a rock star testifier for us on our childcare initiatives at the Capitol, so thank you for that. And then to my immediate left, this is a unique opportunity, because usually when we have the elected officials here, we're inviting them here as the elected official. But that's not necessarily the case with this one. Representative Dave Baker does a great job representing this area. But more importantly, he was instrumental in bringing the community together and getting the business and the local governments, the nonprofits, and everybody coming to the table to figure out collectively how in Spicer they were able to figure out what the plan was, and more importantly, figure out how to make it work financially. So our hope is that between these three folks, you will get a good sense as to the overall process of what they did and how they did it. And more importantly, hear from their wisdom and their insight and their experiences about what works well and what may not work well, so you can go back to your communities and start doing some things. So with that, I will allow each of them, 45, 60 seconds to make opening comments, and then we'll get into the conversation here.
service. Thank you very much for that. Appreciate being a part of this. And again, I will tell you, in our market here, our area, we have most of Kaneohe County is where I represent. We have seen the stats. We've been meeting with child care providers and employers, and we've been meeting and meeting and meeting and meeting and meeting to say, what are we going to do about this? And one day, one of Jenny's staff directors came to me and said, I'm tired of meeting. What can we do about this? It was after a Rotary meeting one day. And I said, well, sit down, let's figure it out. And we sat down and we literally started calling places that we thought would be a good place to have a child care center. And the first place we called was the Spicer Green Lake Mall. Most malls have empty spaces. We called them up and the owner was very excited to have us talk about the concept. Again, this is just two people sitting together saying, we just have to, let's get a vision. Because what made me excited about this initial conversation was the need was so glaring. Our community had done a few other projects that would really put an action item to an end result in opening up, whether it's a destination playground or whether it's other things in the community that we really did. This was our next big thing. And we pulled together this group of people that started meeting because the owner was very interested in this. We had a brand, the YMCA brand of childcare, which was about as good of a brand as we could get to have that sales pitch. And then we started knocking on a few doors initially for what is the sense from the employers, because we had to raise, it was about $600,000 or $800,000. It kept going up. But we found a place, and our goal was, let's find a space that could be between 60 and 90 slots for kids. And golly, I think it was a year and a half later, we actually opened up the place. We raised the money all privately. There was one help from $50,000 from DEED. The city of Spicer really stepped up through their EDA. We got donations in kind. But I will tell you that if you start asking the right people in your communities and look at the spaces around, and if they're willing to actually expand the thinking of joining efforts and making some initial investments for the facility, and then turning that over like we did at the YMCA, they took on the rent obligation, but we gave them a state-of-the-art facility with a long-term lease, which we think we put them in a very good position to be very successful there in northern Kaneohe County. And as soon as we got it open, COVID hit. So, I mean, there were some other things that came, but it's open, doing great, very well received in the community. But employers right now, private industries, are desperate to say, what do you need? Where can we write a check out in a lot of ways? And they will do things like, again, electricians will come and pull wire. Painters will come and be a part of this, and they would love to see their name on a donor's wall. But those are the kind of, I think, growth and innovative and public-private partnerships that we need to do that, and it worked really well here in this area. We had a super core group that were working on this, fundraising group. Again, the Y was continuously working on policy updates, and then they had to do the hiring. But we had that in place here, and again, for us, it worked really well. And we are super excited about what the outcome was. And again, we could not have done it without Jenny and her team. Also, the foundations were here for us as well. I mean, Southwest Initiative have been the backbone of understanding child care needs in greater Minnesota for a long, long time. So we had the right partners at the table. It worked really well for us. And we just love telling them our story. And anytime we want to go into more details, we're happy to do that. But here's the operator of that, and she's doing an amazing job. So thanks.
Thanks, Dave. And thanks for having me here today. I'm excited to be here and share some of this story. We, as Dave has said, it was beginning of January when we walked in to meet with Dave and try to brainstorm some places. We looked at a couple different places just to make sure that we had the spot that seemed to be the best fit. We wanted to serve up to 90 children. Currently we're at 72, and this fall we will transition an infant room into a preschool room just because of our numbers, and we will hit that 90. So it's been We actually opened December of 2019 and then went into COVID mode 4 months later. So we haven't known a normal year since we opened, really. But we are full, and that's a good thing. And we're taking care of kids, and we're filling that need. When we started this out, there was 255 needed openings between New London and Spicer, and another 150 needed in Wilmer. And so when we started looking at the map, Wilmer has 4 child care centers. Spicer has none, and New London has none. They have family providers, which we made very clear we need the family providers. Do not go out of business because we need you. We can't fill all those spots. We can help, but we can't fill them all. So it was really important to work in that community and have them understand we're not the competition. We're coming in because there's a need, and we want you to still be here, and how do we help? So working through some of those kind of politic things that go on. It was a nice welcome into the Spicer community. We had support from the city of Spicer, the Spicer EDA. They actually financed our gap loan at 0%. And so we were able to take in donations that lasted over 3 or 4 years. In fact, the last one will be paid off this next July, so that we could get the center built and open and pay off those pledges to the EDA as we went along. So that was a significant contribution from them. The city also helped us with sewer and piping to expand water lines and all of that so that the center could function and meet the codes that we had to meet. We had donations from $10 from individuals up to $100,000 from companies. We raised $826,000 starting in April and finishing in August. And so it was a very intentional effort with a great team. If we wouldn't have walked in to sit down with Dave, and Dave wouldn't have recruited Ken Warner and Sarah Carlson right off the bat, we would have been sunk. So the amazing team of volunteers that stepped forward from those first 3 corps that really recruited we had a team of about 15 people that worked on raising all of the money. So that is a key element when you look at this project, that you have to have those right people there to surround you and give you that support and help in that process of both giving input and helping you raise the money. So.
Thanks, Jenny. As Scott said, I'm Scott Marquardt. Before I joined the foundation, I was Economic Development Director in Montevideo, where I've lived since 2000, so my lens is working for a greater Minnesota community before I came there, and that's really the perspective I'm going to bring. You're going to hear more from Jenny and Representative Baker about the project specific. I mean, we're very proud to be a funder of it and could be more proud to be involved in it at the amount that we could and engage, and look forward to hearing that story. I'm going to probably chime in more toward the end, Scott, about what I'm seeing around here, but I will just say I realize all of you, or hopefully all of you, realize that this is a major issue in your community. Long before the pandemic, from what we heard throughout all our 18 counties, is that this was the fastest growing economic development issue, and it's worse now. The Minneapolis Fed has gone on record earlier this year saying childcare will be the but for, or the key issue as to how women re-engage in the workforce. And there's been a lot of other think tanks, academics, universities, and researchers saying that this will be the critical issue. And as we chime in later, I'm going to talk from what I'm seeing communities do at the community level, kind of the approach that we're doing. But as Scott said, if you haven't talked to your RDC, and I know there's some out here, I see Jay and Michelle, probably others, if you haven't talked to your Initiative Foundation, there are a lot of people out there to help you. Your First Children's Finance folks, your chamber executive, if you have a chamber in your community, please engage everyone else. If I can say one thing throughout the whole day is these projects are collaborative in nature, and as you've heard already, if the private sector is not at the table, they're not going to go anywhere. I'm not going to advocate that these are city-led, city-run, or city-owned. but city government certainly needs to be at the table. But if the business folks, if the citizens that are, at the co-op in the morning rolling dice, solving all the world's problems, if they're not at the table, we need to engage them all, because they're voters, they're stakeholders, and they have a lot of influence. And where I've seen communities get very successful is when they do engage the people that might not have a child in child care, might not be an employer, but they're key voices that might not realize it's been an issue. And before I turn it back, what's been really good to me, and this may sound kind of fluffy or philosophical, is how the narrative has changed. I mean, when this started becoming an issue, we heard many elected officials or people that had influence say, well, that's a parent's issue, or that's a mom's issue. And I'm hearing these people now say, this is a community issue and this is my problem. And I celebrate that, even that if that's fluffy and they can't do anything about it, at least they're acknowledging that if this community does not solve this problem, the business is not going to grow. I'm tired of hearing businesses say we're making workforce decisions based upon child care availability. And that's happening all the time. It's happening in your towns. You all know this, and it's going to continue. As far as a teaser to the rest of my comments, what's really starting to concern me now is not just the amount of family child care providers that are retiring or closing, but the workforce issue. I realize there's help wanteds everywhere. We all know that. Okay, that's Captain Obvious. But the child care workforce is getting significantly constrained right now. There are child care facilities in this region that are having to make decisions on hours, days opening or closures based upon workforce. And the House Early Childhood Committee this year heard testimony from a nonpartisan, unbiased source saying approximately 1/3 of the child care and early childhood workforce in Minnesota is on some form of public assistance. As places are paying $19, $20, $25 an hour just to get people in their door, and we're trying to get teacher qualified people in at $11, $12, $13. The marketplace is broken in many ways. I'm a free market person. I believe in the market, but the market's broken, and without public subsidy, this is not going to happen. Representative Baker's been a big leader in this, having government at the state level engage when it makes sense. But we're hoping all of you at the community level realize the market's broken and will continue to be without help. So I'll chime in later, Scott, kind of on our approach.
Great, thank you everybody. That was a great baseline setting for this conversation. So what I want to do over the next 15 minutes or so is kind of go through the arc of from start to finish on this project. So first off, Jenny, you acknowledged that you had a couple hundred slot shortage that you had in this area. How do you go about figuring out what that number is or what the actual need is within the community, rather than kind of saying, we know we have a child care shortage, but we don't really know what it is? What resources can folks tap into on that?
First Children's Finance. They are remarkable. And the studies they can do are detailed. They give you all the information you need, not just the numbers of slots that you're short, but what's the average rates being charged within your county? What can to help you budget for what a child care could produce in income, and then looking at expenses. What are we paying in this county? What do we have to pay to get in, teachers and the teacher certified staff, as well as our assistant teachers and aides in a child care center. So they can give you kind of those market rates as well as those numbers you need. They also are remarkable in assisting if you have an inexperienced group, because 15 years ago, how many of you were really invested in childcare? If you think about it, and now it's all you talk about, right? So it's that learning curve. They can come to the table with resources, expertise, financial help, all of those things if you are in need.
Perfect, thank you. And for Children's Finance, if you go back to that blue sheet, I think on page 1, you will see the contact information for Children's Finance. You should have them on speed dial if you want to address your child care shortage. So then after you identified that you had the shortage and what the shortage was, it seemed like the next step was building that community engagement, bringing the people together. Can each of you talk a little bit about, who needs to be at the table and how you get that consensus built around identifying and agreeing on the problem and making the commitment to come together to address it.
So yeah, after sitting at a number of planning meetings over and over and over and over again, with no action on the other side, it got to be, we probably did that for 9 months. As the community was trying to put a plan together. But after that January day that Troy and I sat down and talked about, we just came from this meeting, this is the need, what do? We can't wait. It's not something we can put off for another 9 months. We need to do something. And so you need to identify those people who have shown in the past that they can actually get things done. Who are the doers? Who do you go to when you need something done? Who is that person? And Dave is that person, along with Sarah Carlson and Ken Warner and a whole team that were recruited around them from the New London, Spicer, and Wilmer area. It was a community area-wide effort, not just a Wilmer effort or a Spicer effort or a New London effort. So we had lots of people that we could draw from, but we wanted the doers in the community, those that knew who had the money that would benefit this project, and those who can get us to our goal so that we could start building.
One of the things we wanted to do when we first got out of the gate was make sure that we had a couple of major funds before we kind of made the announcement that we're doing this. I think if you can find the right anchor to sort of give you that first initial push, if our goal was $700,000, but we already had commitments for, let's say, 100 or 150,000, which we did, excuse me, before we went to the press, because the press and the media is extremely important on this as well, to sell this to the community. And put a little bit of money or find a local designer that can give you what a look would be, so you have a brochure, something to leave behind, that this is really happening. Put the committee on that brochure to see who's working on it, both some city and private officials. But it will come together when you get the media behind you, when you show the need. Again, we were short 200 and some slots in just the northern part of the county. And it took, and we allowed, again, companies to do 3-4 year pledges. They wanted to do. We went into one company that I didn't expect much at. And they were literally thinking of, they probably had 100 employees, but they literally were looking at taking a wing of their office building and actually turning it into a child care center for their employees because they were so desperate. And when we walked in the door, it was like the lights opened up and it was just amazing. And we got a check for $40,000 over 4 years. And it was timing was perfect. They saw, why would we want to do our own thing when we got the YMCA in our community that could actually do this? And they don't want to get into the business. They were totally not in that business at all, what they do. And they didn't want to be, but they were so desperate they're ready to do that. So in our case here, again, it was about the brand of not only the YMCA, but about the brand of how we were selling it to the community. We have a need, we got to get this done. And when you start this process, folks, you got to have a short timeline. Because if the longer it goes, it loses its steam. You got to keep it short, keep it energized, do some local fundraisers. I think we did you could donate some stuff and some toys, I think, and there were some events you could do that you didn't have to be looking for that $5,000 check or those big things like that. You could just do things where people could come by. You could seriously do a all-day car wash with somebody that is already in business, and you could get a good deal from somebody. But those are the kind of things that people could do, because everything was going to go to the new child care center. And I think it really it can catch on, but keep it short. Be focused, have the right people at the table, and every one of you city officials here know of the right 2-3 people right now in your community that could do this if you wanted to do something like this. And I know Jenny still has extra of the leave back brochures that we used to show exactly what it looked like that we were sharing with our partners on this when we left a business or something.
As I think about the communities that we're talking to right now, a huge player that sometimes can get left out of these is the faith community. Not only do the churches have space, but there's mission alignment, there's access to folks that could donate and fund it. But if you're having these conversations in your communities, if you have a ministerium, if you have a group where the faith leaders come together, that's a huge piece. As you know, you just heard, so many people need to come together on this, and when we talk to businesses, sometimes the first reaction is concern about liability. I'm not going to do childcare, I'm not going to get into that space. You don't have to. But when the solutions are framed to them that you could be a financial supporter, you might be able to guarantee some slots, as you just heard, it really opens up. We've heard businesses go so far as to say we donate a lot. If they could put up a facility, we would help guarantee some spawns. We perhaps sponsor the loss in the infant room and help subsidize some things that would come together. Also, depending on the size of your community, we work with a number of communities that have, under 1,000 population, so they may not have the infrastructure for some projects. But as you think about simple things like food, don't get stressed out or concerned about needing to put an expensive kitchen in. We're hearing from places that they're going to partner with the hospital or the nursing home to do 20 meals. They're already doing 100, what's another 20? We know of plenty of examples where they're catering that in from somewhere else to buy down the cost of a regulated kitchen. And it's little things like that. But I will go back to the first piece. If the business community's not there, it's not going to go anywhere. In 2019, when we used to be able to come down for hearings, the Minnesota Chamber was at almost every hearing because they're hearing from all their members around the state that this is an issue. And it didn't matter what side of the aisle you were on. When the Minnesota Chamber was there speaking for business and employers, every member of those committees paid attention. And who in your community can lift up and be that voice or be that champion that can go do shoulder taps coming forward. I'm just going to plant a seed about, your residents disengaged. A week from tomorrow, you're going to probably have more alumni and graduates back in your community than you've had in ages, or in about a month. We continue to hear from a number of our, what is it? Pretty loud. Okay, sorry. We continue to hear from a number of places that opportunities around Thanksgiving or around the Christmas holidays or winter are great chances to have conversations with people that have perhaps graduated or moved away. So we're encouraging communities to look at alumni or folks that have moved back. Are there folks that might have gone to school for early childhood and moved away or had an interest in coming back? They've been sources for potentially teachers at the facilities, for starting operations themselves, and we'd encourage you to really take a look at alumni too.
So we've had a couple of numbers mentioned here. Start off with about $900,000, $1 million or so for the overall project. And then we've also had, Representative Baker, you mentioned to secure that first 150 before you go to market and start talking about this. How did you go about figuring out, identifying who those folks are that could be, to help seed that first $150,000? And then also, can you talk a little bit about, you mentioned donors range from $10 to $100,000. Like, was it a lot of small things? Was it a lot of, like, how did you get the financing side of it figured out?
I think Jenny could tell you a bit more of the total donors and the average donation kind of a thing. We had to go back to the normal folks that you have to go to that usually are the ones that step up if there's a project in town that you can kind of rely on as a city. They've been hopefully you've got some decent industrial or some commercial customers that just are the do-gooders. They really are generous with their funds. We started with some of those. We also then went to our local Wilmer Area Community Foundation, which again, she has mentioned, Jenny, the name of Sarah Carlson in our community. There are donors that they have that really want to focus privately and quietly in childcare or something around education. These are not child care centers, these are early education centers. And I had to be corrected when we were going through this process. This isn't a child care center. This is early learning center. And so I kept using that, and we did it so we could actually help raise money because these are the first schools that children will attend. And so I think that was important for us. Again, I think whatever that number is, even if you start out with something smaller than we were able to do, Give them a chance to pay over time if they're trusted partners. Understand you could not have something, something might not come through, so have a plan of backup like we did with the EDA and Spicer. But then also be ready to hit it hard and kind of stay on point early and really stay focused. Also look around you as to what other activities for fun.
Back on our feet and recoup our kids. So having, especially in that situation, having that capital piece done and aside, really, really important.
All right, and then last question, I'm going to turn it over to Scott here because he can put 5 minutes of conversation into 60 seconds, so I need you to do it here. What are the public resources the city should know about? Again, highlighted on your sheet, what they should know about when they walk out the door that would be available for them.
If you don't know your first children's finance person and they've just added significant capacity, like 6 people for Greater Minnesota, get to know them. We've got 2 for Southwest Minnesota, and I know they're for all around. They do all kinds of stuff. It's another piece I would think about is, and I know the last cohort has been done on it, but the DEED child care program, which we're so grateful to the legislature for approving that, and we're anxiously looking forward to the announcements from there. That's direct investments into projects, into initiatives. So if you haven't familiarized yourself with the DEED program, they have a wonderful website with it being on there. One thing I just will, as long as we're talking about public dollars, is looking at your own EDA or city loan funds. If they're not, if childcare is not an allowable use, or if it's restricted only to family or restricted only to center, please take a look at that and be as flexible as you can be, allowing communities to do innovative things like mixed-use buildings or to put $10,000 into a house, kind of like the old small city structures or fix-up funds, but kind of take a look at your own dollars. I'm going to say one thing about the city and take an extra minute and put a shout out to my friend Pat Boston, Mayor of Laverne. As we think about what communities can do, Pat's an example of excellence as a mayor in this space, and I mean that. He is, and the crew at the chamber and the EDA and the city are doing amazing things, and Pat's there all the time at the conversations. And most recently, about 2 months ago, they hosted a provider appreciation event in Laverne. And Pat was there along with the chamber manager, a couple of folks from John Call's team, and just saying thank you to the providers. If I could say one thing all day, if your town has not done a provider appreciation event in the last 2 years, there's nothing more important for you to do when you to get back. There's nothing we hear more from communities than, from child care providers, than how grateful they are for an appreciation event. Because for many, they've told me as they left, the only time the government ever shows up is when I'm getting regulated or licensed or looked at. So to have the mayor say, have a free cheeseburger and a drink ticket, it's a big deal. It's old school business retention, just like you do for the manufacturers. When you do these things, the business community they come out in groves with prizes and events. Doesn't have to cost much. It could be a couple $100. But please, if you haven't done that, use your cachet as a mayor or city administrator and have an event. I know it's getting complicated with scheduling right now, but thanks for letting me share that, Scott. There's been nothing more meaningful to us and nothing more meaningful to the child care providers that are on the edge right now to do things.
Great, thank you all. At this point, we have 11 minutes and 27 seconds for questions. So, our first one down here.
Can they speak a little bit to hiring staff and recruiting staff?
So the question was hiring staff, retaining staff, recruiting staff. Any insights, Jenny?
It's hard. So we've been, part of working with First Children's Finance was trying to develop that pipeline of certified teachers and assistant teachers, just, staff to work within the child care centers. And they started out, they had raised money for scholarships for kids, for Ridgewater to attend early childhood classes. The scholarships weren't even used. We couldn't even recruit people to use the scholarships to get the education to come in. So we've gone to growing our own. We've had I've had a number of conversations with Dr. Johnson at Ridgewater of what we really need to have a certified teacher. What does that mean? What are the qualifications? How do we get you that position? And so they're looking at, instead of a 2-year program for an early childhood education associate's degree, the CDA program that can get us that in much less time and less money for a student. And so working with the local college is one way to kind of speed that up. The other way is to hire them and train them. So we hire good people. We hire people with the personality, the disposition, and the love for children, and we invest in them. We put the money into their CDA training. We give them the time to do their online learning and their portfolios so that they can get that certification and be a certified teacher. And that has been our most successful way of recruiting staff.
And to that, I think we gave them a little bit of money too from the fundraising to get staff up to speed. Because we knew that was going to be a tough part of this. But also they were able to brag that you get to work in a brand new center. So as part of that too, to try to recruit people, was a new center, plus we knew they had some upfront cost that needed some help up front too.
And one quick plug on the staffing side, the next couple of years in Minnesota will be a little bit more resource rich. We've got, with the federal COVID money that's coming to the state, we're increasing our CCAP, our child care assistance program rates. So if we can get centers propped up right now, they're going to be in a better position for the next 3 to 4 years, which will hopefully put solid legs under them to be able to move forward depending on how the future goes. So, next question. Yes.
You talked early on about the importance of your facility coming alongside or the family and previously established centers coming alongside your facility. What's been your continued relationship with those places? Are those established centers feeling some competition there, and are they full also?
So most of our family centers are full in the area. We have, just like many of you, lost family centers over the time period as well, especially during COVID, with people afraid to have a variety of different families together in a home. So there's been some of that apprehension. We try whatever we can do to be helpful to family centers in our area. So, like I said, we've been kind of separated a little bit to COVID, but our ideal situation is to be able to do things like we provide CPR training. It's part of the why, and we provide it for all of our staff. So that's something we can share and keep providers updated on CPR first aid certifications for their center, and being able just to share resources in that way, training resources or whatever we can provide and open up to family providers as a resource in the community.
In the counties we work in, we haven't heard a community-based project that has caused significant stress or consternation or opposition from family providers. I'm not going to be foolish and say it doesn't happen, but I could think a couple of years ago, it was in a different community, I won't say where, it doesn't matter, but the mayor convened all of the family child care providers and everyone showed up. We talked about doing a community-based project, and he flat out asked them, do you have concerns? Do you think this is going to be competition? What's your stress on this? Not one person said it's an issue. They said, we're tired of turning families away. It hurts, it's starting to weigh on us. Also, look at the age of the providers here. We're concerned about it retiring. It's hurting our town. They supported it, they blessed it, and we spent half the meeting brainstorming on who could staff it. So I'm not saying that happens everywhere, but I think there's a perception from some communities we can't do it because it's competition. And in the eyes of the providers we talk to, it's the opposite of that. They want the city to do it because they know their industry's hurting. So I think it's okay to push that envelope and to have that conversation because it sure seems welcomed around here. I'm not certain that's the response you get in the suburbs from my friends down there, but around here it is.
And the other side of that too is if you build a 100-slot childcare center in your community, it may be 3 of those providers who want to come in there and work, and you lose 30 slots, but you gain 70. So, you know, the economies of scale really play out in that situation.
Not that long ago, we did, Minnesota opted into all-day kindergarten. I'm assuming that might have been helpful. And maybe it's not saying child development would be adversely affected, but is there discussion that the legislature is saying, okay, all-day preschool, 3-year-olds, and putting another link in the chain of the school district to help avert some of this crisis?
You know, there's always talk about government getting more involved in earlier, younger kids and really from birth to pre-K, but I have not heard anything real serious recently about this, about going earlier than what we've already done in the last couple of years with that. Governor Dayton was a big pusher for that pre-K thing. It took a long time for us to get there. I think we found kind of that right sauce to get there. And I think we want to kind of see how this shakes out with the child care centers and the early learning centers, because that was their bread and butter, are those 3- and 4-year-olds. And we didn't want to lose a lot of those back to the schools, and how is that going to affect them? So I think we're still kind of seeing how that's playing out too. So currently nothing that I know of that is seriously being talked about. We want to be able to start paying for our basically our E12 stuff now, getting it done right, properly, and getting the right teachers in the classroom. So that's part of our focus now.
What we're hearing from the smart people in childcare is they're watching what's coming from Washington on universal pre-K, and as long as it's mixed delivery, they're good. But 5 years ago at this conference up when it was at Arrowwood, there was a center director from Jackson County that was keynote, and I remember her saying, and I'll always remember this, if you get universal pre-K in this state, governor, you're going to shut me down. And she's the only provider in that town. And there was not the purpose there to spark a debate, but just a reality check. So what we hear from our advisors is they're watching it very carefully and hoping that it's mixed delivery. And again, I'm not qualified to be rambling here, but they're paying attention, and hopefully the child care market can play a piece, because we see the pro formas. The infant and toddler rooms are a whole lot of red ink, lots of red ink, and it's the older kids, as Representative Baker said. So if it comes out of DC with no mixed delivery, I think we have no clue what hit us. And I'm not trying to be political, but we have to keep an eye on that and do what we can to advocate. You agree, Jenny?
Absolutely. It would destroy infant and toddler care because you wouldn't be able to offer it at a affordable price for parents. There'd just be no way.
So there's an old adage in the industry that you lose money on infants, you break even on toddlers, and you make your money on the older kids. And so if you take out the older kids, you have nowhere to go but down. So we've got time for one last question, although I will be around for the rest of the day, so a question that didn't get answered, both Scott and I will be here through the evening. Come find us. Yes.
This discussion came up a few years back in Bemidji, and 51% of all children in our country today are raised by a single parent, and that's normally mom. In Detroit Lakes, 38% of our kids in school are getting a free or reduced lunch. A lot of these kids are from poverty, and the biggest trouble is with education. We're not talking just care, but we're talking about educating these kids. And I personally believe that the state of Minnesota should have care and education of these kids start at age 2, because when we get these kids this gap into kindergarten and they start school, they're so far behind some of these kids that got parents that are able to afford to take them to the right centers for learning, that by the time they're 6th grade, they're 2 years behind time. And then we get these kids into special education. We spend millions of dollars in this state for special ed. If we took care of these kids when they were younger, we probably wouldn't have to do that. I just think that we should look at that program to help a lot of these families out. Because we've got such a poverty level with a lot of these kids in our school right now, and they don't have a fighting chance compared to somebody that can afford to take them to a preschool and all this extra money. You have to have the money, but we're talking money all the way through. But I really want the state to look at taking care of this all the way down to 2 years old and giving every kid an equal chance.
Well, I think that's a good note to wrap things up here. I want to thank Scott, Jenny, Representative Baker for your time today and your leadership, not only on this issue, but within this community. I will be out in the hallway